can't keep saying, oh, I wish I'd been raised differently. Yeah, of course, we all wish that things had been different, but they weren't. They're what they are. And so you're not tasked with going back and changing the past. What you're tasked with is making the most of the present that you have. And once you're aware of why you are the way that you are, now you have a responsibility or a duty for fixing it. Well, I'm like this because of my father. Well, now you take it from the unconscious into the conscious. There are things in our lives that motivate our behavior, and we don't know why we are the way that we are. And so it's understandable. And when someone comes along and you talk with them, and then all of a sudden you realize, I am this way because of how I was raised or because of these other experiences. Well, before that, I can understand why a person might behave the way that they do. But once you know why and what's motivating you unconsciously, well, now you're tasked with changing it. It's interesting, isn't it, that the person will say, I have no control over my own life because of how I was raised. And yet this person is trying really, really, really hard to control somebody else's life. So that tells you that they do have that they are aware anyway, that they have the power to control lives. He realizes at an unconscious level, if I keep messaging her this and if I escalate it, I can control her responses. He might not realize that at a conscious level, but at a conscious level, he does realize he's trying to control somebody else. And it's interesting that he can control other people, but not himself. And it's not that he can't control himself, it's that he's abdicated that responsibility. Maybe there's an idea that you hold on to so strongly. And deep down inside, you know how much time you spent thinking about things. I was thinking recently that when I first started teaching, this is my 15th year, students were just tired of talking about abortion. Because that was, if you didn't know as a teacher what topic you'd give students to write about, you would just ask them, okay, write a persuasive essay about abortion. And it was just common. Now people are, we clutch our pearls. It's we can't talk about that, and we're afraid to talk about it. We used to talk about it so much that students were bored of talking about it, bless you. And so they would have opinions about things, but it was a constant conversation that was always happening. And then all of a sudden the conversation stopped happening. I don't exactly know why. And then it went from not happening anymore to now they discourage us from talking about it. And I guess the question becomes then why would we be afraid of talking about it? Because it's emotional for people. Okay, well, aren't most topics that are interesting emotional for people? Heck, what kind of music you like is emotional for people. A friend of mine told me recently that I know that they hold me in some level of esteem, and they trust me because they made a playlist I could listen to. And they said, that's really personal. This is my music, and so I shared my music with you. That means I trust you. For some people, that really is it. Other people, it's you want to share your music with everybody. It's going to be a difference in how you approach people around you, and how sacredly you hold on to certain things. Because what if I come along and I criticize your music? Well, by criticizing your music, if you really love your music, that's like criticizing you, especially if your music is like the soundtrack of your life. It's not just something that you play in the background, it's stuff that you really sit and listen to and you really get into, man. And if someone comes along and tells you that it sucks, then it's not them telling us our music sucks. We take it like they're telling us that we suck, because we can't extricate those two things, us and our music. It's all the same thing to us. And so then maybe it's like that with these views, that we're so closely connected to the views that we hold, whether we believe them or not, whether we can explain them or not, that we hold them so close to us, whether we should or shouldn't is immaterial. What matters is that we actually do hold them so close to us that our views about things like abortion or whatever controversial issue, it's part of our character. And so any kind of an attack on those arguments is like an attack on us. And maybe that's why it's so hard for us to explain it, because we've never really had to. But then again, we're also not wanting to delve into certain issues because who knows where it's going to lead. Imagine if we get to the end of it and your view, whether you're pro or con, imagine if your view completely changes. And that's really hard now, especially if you've talked about it before, to back off of something like that. Yeah. I was just talking to somebody recently, and she was telling me about a guy who she was dating, and she kind of introduced the conversation by asking me, when do you think stalking is too far? Like, what's that line of too much stalking? Like, well, what's that?
Maybe in general, stalking.
Yeah, yeah. And so she was telling me about this guy that she was dating, and he lives in Imperial Beach, and he takes a bus over here just to stalk her. And she's like, do you think that's too much? I'm like, a little bit, you know? And she was telling me about there's another guy who likes her, and he's been trying to go after her for months. And she's like, she says, and he's like everything that you'd want a guy to be. You know, he has money, he has a car. And I laughed. And she's like, you know me. Because she's very much about money. Everything in her life is about money, 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 money. Not in the gold digging sense, but she's always trying to find some new opportunity to make money, to save money, to earn money. She's that person who will ask you, like, she'll have a Snickers bar, and she'll ask you, do you want a Snickers? And you'll be like, yeah. And then she'll say, $1? She'll always run the price by you afterwards, because she always wants to make a quarter here, 10 cents there. And she's wise with it. She's very good with money. And so she's like, telling me that there's this guy who has money and, you know, has a car. And then she goes on to say, yeah, well, he also gets good grades. I suppose that matters too. And that he has a good relationship with his family. And he was trying to explain to her, I'm trying to show you how things are supposed to be. And she's like, and I have no interest in him. Why not? And then what's that?
She wants that chase.
Yeah. But they're both chasing her. But the first one, she told me nothing about the guy except for that. And so I said, well, the kind of person that you're interested in, and I was just kind of unpacking it for her. And then she's like, how can you know so much about him? I wasn't wrong about anything I said. You know, it's not that hard to piece together, man. It's not that hard to piece together. This other guy doesn't have a job because she contrasted it, of course, by saying that the second one, you know, had some money, which means the first one doesn't. The second one has a car, which means the first one doesn't. Other one gets good grades. The other one is supposed to be in school but dropped out. And then you can build on top of that. He's on probation. He smokes a lot, but then he tries to detox before his tests with his probation officer. And I just thought, wow, how could you not just absolutely fall in love with this person? And then she's like, yeah. I go, but you know, why is he stalking you? And she's like, I don't know. Like, I tell him all the time, leave me alone, leave me alone. I'll message him and tell him, why is he stalking her? You ever feed a pigeon before?
Oh.
Yeah. What happens if you feed the pigeon? Yeah. Pigeon keeps coming back. So by messaging him, she keeps inviting him to come back into her life, because he'll send her messages, and he said, well, now he's threatening me. And I go, well, yeah, of course, because it's always going to have to escalate. If you pull back the attention, then of course he's going to escalate it so that he gets your attention in other ways. And I said, I hope you understand. I'm not saying that it's your fault or that you've been, you know, I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm just saying this is why it's happening. So I was explaining, well, then why wouldn't he continue this? Because it keeps getting your attention. What's the thing he wants? He wants your attention. He behaves this way. He doesn't get the attention. He behaves in continuously escalating ways. He keeps getting your attention. And then also she's kind of, by doing that, she's sending like a nonverbal message like, it works. Keep doing more of this. Keep doing more of this. So he does. Surprise, surprise. And she's like, I don't understand why he's like that. I knew nothing about him. I said, well, because his dad left him when he was younger. He's in jail, so he has some level of a relationship with his dad, but it's not a real one. And so he doesn't know how it is that he's supposed to behave, and then he suffers from these abandonment issues, and you leaving him is just another extension of somebody in his life who he cares about leaving him. She's like, how'd you know he was in jail? I go, duh, it's not, I mean, when you know what to look for, it's not hard to figure these things out. She thought I knew the person. I've never met him before, and I don't even know his name, never met him before in my life. Well, then how is it that you can know that? Because you can see the symptoms of it in this person. Why is he freaking out? He's afraid of being abandoned. Why? Because he doesn't have, he's never really grown up. He continues to behave like a child. Why? Because it gets him attention. And it's attention that he didn't have when he was growing up. It almost doesn't matter what kind of attention you get at a certain point. Attention is just attention. And then, of course, you don't think much of yourself, and so you behave in highly destructive ways. And I don't even mean experimental ways. I mean highly destructive ways, because you don't think that you're worth behaving well, and you don't think it's even possible anyway. And I said, and so I'm sure he blames his father for why he is the way that he is. And she's like, oh my God, he says it all the time. I'm like this because of my dad. And I go, yeah, but then the thing is that at a certain point, you have to give up your hope. At a certain point, you have to give up hope for a better past. You can't keep saying, oh, I wish I'd been raised differently. Yeah, of course, we all wish that things had been different, but they weren't. They're what they are. And so you're not tasked with going back and changing the past. What you're tasked with is making the most of the present that you have. And once you're aware of why you are the way that you are, now you have a responsibility or a duty for fixing it. And so it's like, well, I'm like this because of my father. Well, now you take it from the unconscious into the conscious. There are things in our lives that motivate our behavior, and we don't know why we are the way that we are. And so it's understandable. And when someone comes along and you talk with them, and then all of a sudden you realize, I am this way because of how I was raised or because of these other experiences. Well, before that, I can understand why a person might behave the way that they do. But once you know why and what's motivating you unconsciously, well, now you're tasked with changing it. And so, what is it that this person's after? Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that the person will say, I have no control over my own life because of how I was raised. And yet this person is trying really, really, really hard to control somebody else's life. So that tells you that they do have that they are aware anyway, that they have the power to control lives. He realizes at an unconscious level, if I keep messaging her this and if I escalate it, I can control her responses. He might not realize that at a conscious level, but at a conscious level, he does realize he's trying to control somebody else. And it's interesting that he can control other people, but not himself. And it's not that he can't control himself, it's that he's abdicated that responsibility. It's just better and easier, more comfortable. Why? Because having to look inside and figure out why we are the way that we are, and then that's hard enough. But then also recognizing that we have the power to do something about it, of course, also is very, very difficult, because then we're tasked with doing it. And in our minds, it's easier. So she was asking me, well, what do you think his life's going to be like? I said, his life's going to be a life of going in and out of jail. Why? Because he's not capable of taking care of himself. And the idea of having to take care of himself, take control of his own life, is terrifying. So he's going to find himself going in and out of jail just so that he can have somebody else take care of him. Because he doesn't have that figure in his life. He never learned how to be. Now, he could have. There are lots of examples. There are people around that you can look at. But it's those situations. So, would we ever think to say that to a person, though? Most people. Probably not. Probably not, because then we know we don't want to upset people. We don't want to offend people. We just don't know what they're going through. Okay, but then understand that when that happens, and you do recognize that you understand why somebody is the way they are. And I'm not just saying like you should go around and give your opinion to everybody, whether they ask for it or not. But when people do ask for it, and you do understand why people are the way they are, or you do understand a situation, if you just receive them and then not give them the expertise of something that you have to say, you're sending them out no better for having met you. In fact, probably worse, because what kind of advice do we give people when we don't want to give advice? Just do what makes you happy. And what is it that makes this person happy? Smoking a lot of weed. What's that? Crime, yeah. That's what makes this person happy. Why? Because this is what gets the person attention, and that's what ultimately they're seeking. They're looking for the base of, they're looking to get that, like that base thing that they're seeking is affirmation that they matter. And the way that, in their minds, the way that you matter is that you get attention. People only give you attention if you matter. So how do I get attention? That's all happening maybe at the unconscious level. But once you make that conscious now, again, he's tasked now with having to face it. And we don't like facing those things. It sucks. It's challenging. It's hard. And then also, again, it carries a level of responsibility for us afterwards. Because then that's when we start to realize that however our life turns out is going to largely be based on how we respond to the situations that we're in. You can't control the situations that you're in. A lot of times, none of us chose our families, our communities, our even to a certain extent, we didn't even choose our friends so much as we were just like placed next to people. And you can of course choose to pursue friendships with them or not, but you get what I'm saying. What matters isn't the situation that you're in, it's how you respond to that situation. And you can make things better, you can make things worse. God knows we can make things worse, but so oftentimes how we can make things better is something that escapes us. We just don't see it. And maybe what I'm saying to you, maybe you understood like a part of it, not the whole thing. Maybe you can't explain it. But how do you get good at explaining things? You practice, you try. You practice, you try. Like, I read some of your journals. Some of you guys have some really smart things to say, man, and I read them. And I always think like, wow, I wish you said something in class. But why don't we say something in class? There's a lot of reasons you've got something to say, but also maybe there's a fear of being rejected. In other words, maybe what you're going to say is so is contrary to what the rest of the class is saying, so you don't want to say it. Or maybe you're just not sure that it's the right thing. Bless you. Maybe you're just not sure that it's the right answer. Again, keep in mind, there are no wrong answers. Well, there are some. If you read this and you say, I think he's talking about fishing. I don't know. I'd ask you to explain it, but have I ever told anybody in here, no, you're wrong? Next one? No. If you tell me what it is that you're thinking, we always ask questions to try to get you to, ask follow-up to try to get you to talk more about it, because you get better at this when you do this. And then it's in that course of explanation and thinking that all of a sudden you start to understand your own position, or maybe understand where things can be strengthened, and that's where you start to change your idea. It doesn't have to be conversations with other people. That's challenging, because then you might feel attacked. But if you're having a conversation with yourself, that's where you can start to come to some real revelations. Yeah. And it's difficult to have a conversation, I guess, about a sensitive subject if you're worried about offending people. Because it's easy for us to say, just who cares if you offend people? Well, you probably do care, because maybe you care about people. Maybe you care about the person. There's a lot of reasons that we would be hesitant to share our beliefs about things. And especially if you're someplace where you're always being told that you're wrong. Is there any, I can't think of any topic that we could talk about in here. Someone was saying to me recently that they liked the class because you can say anything. Say anything. Can you say just anything in here? Yeah. And anything you say in here, there's a really good chance that whatever you say, I'm going to ask you some follow-up questions, not to try to prove you're wrong, but to help you understand, how to get to that point eventually. Because it's how you practice. It's how you practice. Because once you leave this classroom, you go out into those places where people will tell you that you're wrong about everything, or that you don't understand things. So this is your practice ground. And yet I also understand though that like you guys, I don't know, you guys can't really make mistakes. Like I keep thinking about if we had cell phones in our pockets and social media when I was in high school. I mean, my God, the stuff that we used to do, it's just unreal, man. I mean, the stuff that we used to say is just unreal. And I think back to it now where like, my goodness, I mean, if we behaved the way that we used to, and everything was always recorded, and there were always witnesses around who were looking to counsel you, I don't think any of my friends and I at all could be employed growing up. Because I mean, all the stuff I've said and done over the years, God, if there was a permanent record of it somewhere out there on the internet, I have a friend, it's like one of my few friends I still talk to from high school. If he came in here, he would just, and he's done this before, not to a class, but long story to one of my college classes, and he'll tell you about some of the stuff I used to do when I was in high school. And then you'll sit there and go like, holy crap, and you're a teacher? Uh-huh. Yeah. But I can also sit back and say, I've done a lot of really interesting stuff, and I can also tell you why a lot of it was wrong. I can also tell you why a lot of it was right, and a lot of it was fun. My point is that there's no record of it. So that means that we were free to do stuff like that. We were free to say things. And if you're free to say things, if you're free to say it, that means that I am too, and then that's how it is that we exchange ideas. And you can be wrong. It's okay to be wrong, because there's not going to be some online movement to counsel you because you say the wrong thing, whatever that means. It's hard. I get it, especially today when it isn't just that you're wrong. If you're wrong, it can cost you a lot. I mean, there are people who have lost admissions to university. There's a student who I'm thinking of, I read about, who lost admissions. He was accepted to Harvard, and then somebody exposed, whatever that means, a 3-year-old tweet that the dude made when he was a 10th grader. Or a 9th grader? It was either a 9th or 10th grader. And it was just like some stupid, it was like a repost of something. It was just something stupid. And the dude with, Harvard saw this and they clutched their pearls and they rescinded his admission. Man, like 3 years ago, man, like who even thinks about that stuff? It's a comment that whatever 10 years ago you could just made offhandedly and nobody would have said anything about it. But today, because everything is documented, it's hard to take any chances. And if you don't take risks, then you really can't grow, which we all understand intuitively, but that also goes along with the things that you say. You've got to take a risk of saying what you believe and having somebody come along and shut it down. It doesn't really matter, some of you, if you're right or wrong. If you asked me, like, if you told me, hey, Skelling, here's my point of view, can you tell me why I'm wrong? Absolutely, 100%. Doesn't matter what your view is. Doesn't matter what my view is. But I know both sides of most issues well enough that I can say, here's what somebody who disagrees with you, here's what they would say. And now you have the choice. You can either take in that criticism and go, maybe they're right. Or you can take in their criticism and go, but I can answer all those points, so maybe I am right. But it all comes along with taking a risk. Like, how do you know, I'm almost afraid to ask, like how old some of you were the first time that you were ever left home alone by yourself. And some of you are like, today old, still never been left home by myself alone. And I think back to, like I was growing up, you'd be like 9 years old and you'd walk down to the store to get stuff for your parents. But it's like, wasn't that dangerous? No. Child abduction is incredibly rare. We tend to think of it like it's always happening. No, it's incredibly rare. Incredibly rare. And whenever someone is abducted, it's almost 100%, literally close to 100% someone you know. Relative, neighbor, something like that. And so is it that there's like, was it that like when I was in high school, there was this big rash of people getting abducted and murdered? No. But if you've never been allowed to stay home alone by yourself, when is the first time you're going to? What's that going to be like? How old are you going to be? Like, you're like 30? All of a sudden you're like, I don't know what to do. Home alone for the first time. You're going to be in your 20s? Who knows? Were you 9 when it first happened? Because then if you were 9 years old and something happened at home, what'd you have to do? Well, you had to figure it out. So what'd you get good at? Figuring stuff out. But it took taking a risk. Parents going like, okay, let's see what happens. Probably not gonna die. Probably, yeah. You do some stupid shit, of course. I remember one time trying to make my mom breakfast. I wanted to surprise her. So I woke up early. I was a little kid. It's one of my first memories. And I couldn't, when you turn the stove on, and then the fire starts. But I turned it on, click, 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 and it wasn't coming out. So I just left it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nearly gassed your house.
Yeah, so it actually woke my mom up with smelling the gas. And so I was just standing there. And then I started looking around like, well, maybe if I had a match, that would do it. So I'm looking around for a match, and that's when my mom came out and found me looking for a match when the whole house smelled like gas. If you don't know, what happens if I light that match?
You're gonna explode your
Everything
house.
blows up, yeah. So it's like, oh my God, well, that's how I learned not to do it. Have you guys ever fix your own plumbing? Yeah. That's how I found out. I remember I was a little kid. I'd go to my dad and say, my sink is backed up. My dad would say, I guess you better figure that out, huh? And so I'd go get his toolbox and I'd carry it. I remember I was so small I had to carry it with 2 arms, and he'd sit in there with me and he would just watch. I remember one time I finally figured out how to open the pipes, and the water just goes everywhere. I'm standing in this puddle of water, and my dad said, you should probably turn the water off first. Yeah. And then but that's how you learn. You learn that systems are fragile and that systems break. And then you get a floor full of water, but then you learn not to do that again in the future. It isn't anything that destroyed anything. It got some things wet, but that's that taking the risk. You have to do the same things with your psychology. You have to do the same thing with your points of view. Expose them so they can break a little bit. And then when they break, they recalcify. I know some of you have heard my shins before, yes? Have you ever heard my shins before? I'll play my shins for you when this is over. That makes me sad. Every once in a while, I guess you had to recertify the crazy credentials. When you hear my shins, you'll understand why my shins make the noises that they make. Because I've broken my shins so many times, literally hundreds of times, that the gaps in the breaks then calcify, which means that my shins end up really, really strong. Sometimes you guys may see me out here, I'll go out there and I'll start kicking the metal pole. Why? Because my shins have been broken so many times that now they're really, really strong in all the places that they've been broken. It's called calcification. So sometimes in your life you need to calcify your views. You need to calcify your heart maybe a little bit. You need to calcify the things in life that matter because that's how you make them stronger. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?